Hello, Professor Kilpatrick here today, and today we're going to look at web design, or also graphic design, and we're going to be talking about four principles today: contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity, and how you can use those principles while creating your web tutorial or creating your teacher website, or even just in general. Teachers create a lot of different things that can be used in the classroom. Before I begin, I want to let you know that the four principles were taken from Robin Williams in her book, Non-Designer's Design Book. In my opinion, teachers are non-designers. They do not have a history with graphic arts or graphic design. And so this book really puts it nice and clearly for people who do not have the design background, but who still design frequently. And teachers oftentimes are making flyers and letters and worksheets and tests and all sorts of instructional documents that they could improve by checking some things out. So I just encourage you to check this book out if you're interested. Good design is as easy as 1, 2, 3. And so what I'm asking is that you learn the principles, recognize when you're not using them, and apply the principles. This may be a design that you're normally used to, but let's change it a little bit and use some of these principles and think about these principles as you do it. Obviously, the second design is better than the first, and it uses the four principles that we're going to cover today. Here's an example of some web design, very obviously very poor, but just having a small amount of insight in these principles can change it to this, which is a little bit better than before, and then we can even grow from this. The four principles, they spell out the word crap. Contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. And excuse my language, but that's the order that we're going to go in today. Contrast is what makes things different from each other based on how dark the letters are. The darker, the larger the letters, the larger the contrast, the more important the information. It brings out those dominant elements. Where the things have less contrast are going to be things that are kind of hidden in the background but still speak volumes as far as instruction. To give you an example, the 1, 2, 3 in this picture is muted. There's very little contrast, but in fact it does offer some instruction when you're looking at this design, and that is something that contrast can offer. When creating your web page or tutorials and that sort of thing, you want to use colors that are opposite of the color wheel. Whites and yellows, white background, yellow fonts, bad, obviously, right? Or purples, blues, and reds in backgrounds and fonts. Those are right next to each other on the color wheel. You want to try to get opposite sides of the color wheel when you're using contrast and thinking about contrast. Here's an example of 3 different brochure things that offer different types of contrast. Not that one is better than the other, but that there is so much that one person can do in changing the contrast to their document. And you can come back and check this out later or push pause. The next is repetition, and repetition is something that is repeated throughout the design, and it creates a consistency in presentations from the first page to the last page and allows for the unity. And you can see the things that were repeated throughout that offer a better design. Finally, alignment. Before I learned anything about graphic design, I was a center-aligned person. I thought that putting things in the center were most important. But really, if you start using left and even right align, it can create a visual flow, and it can allow the eye to move through it a little more freely. Here's a good example of before with the center alignment to now the new with the left alignment. You can also see the differences in contrast, and then we're also entering into the element of our last principle, proximity, where the contact information is divided from the other information because it's showing that there's a difference in the two. Finally, proximity, it groups things that are related and separates the other ones, and even the slightest amount of movement can be good proximity. Right? A good example would be on this picture here where we have Amsterdam going back and forth. You can see the small changes.